The sensation of freezing water filling my lungs vanished in a sudden violent gasp. My eyes snapped open, my hands instinctively clutching my throat as I expected to feel the icy, suffocating currents of the Charles River, dragging me down to the muddy bottom. Instead, my fingers brushed against the soft, warm cashmere of my own sweater. The smell of river algae and copper was replaced by the comforting scent of vanilla and fresh coffee brewing in my kitchen. I was sitting on my expensive West Elm sofa, bathed in the soft afternoon sunlight, filtering through the bay windows of my Boston apartment. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs. Just moments ago, I had been pushed into the freezing river by internet vigilantes, drowning under the weight of false accusations and a viral cyberbullying campaign, orchestrated by my very own niece. Now, the warmth of my living room felt almost alien. My iPhone buzzed on the glass coffee table, shattering the silence. My trembling hand reached out to grab it. The screen lit up with a familiar iMessage from my brother-in-law, Dave. "Hey Claire, thanks so much for this. Since Chloe and Mia are the same age and in the same grade, taking care of one is just like taking care of two. I'll make sure to Venmo you her living expenses on time every month. We really appreciate you taking her in." Directly below the text was an automated notification from the Venmo app. Dave transferred $100, staring at that pathetic sum of $100. A bitter, breathless laugh escaped my lips. I finally confirmed the impossible. I had been reborn. I was sent back to the exact day Dave dropped his daughter off at my doorstep. Looking at the notification, the audacity of their family was almost comical. Because my daughter, Mia, was entering her crucial senior year of high school, and my career as a freelance novelist offered me high flexibility. I had signed a lease on a notoriously expensive apartment in a premier school district, just minutes away from Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy. Rent alone was pushing $3,500 a month. Dave and his wife, Sarah, caught wind of this setup, using out-of-state employment as a convenient excuse. They unceremoniously dumped Chloe at my apartment with a single suitcase, their grand promise of living expenses. A measly $100 a month. I knew full well that $100 wouldn't even cover a week's worth of organic groceries in this zip code. Let alone the countless extracurriculars, clothes, and social expenses of a modern American teenager. But in my past life I was blinded by family loyalty. I had watched Chloe grow up. I couldn't bring myself to turn a child away, so Chloe moved in. Terrified that the teenager might feel like an unwanted burden, I lied to protect her feelings. I told her that her parents were sending plenty of money for her upkeep, deliberately hiding the fact that they essentially abandoned her for $100. I wanted her to feel at home. Whenever I bought something for my daughter, Mia, whether it was a $5 Moleskine notebook, a new MacBook, weekly allowances, or a $2,000 SAT prep course, I always bought an exact duplicate for Chloe. I never treated her as anything less than my own flesh and blood. When she occasionally volunteered to do household chores, I initially refused, wanting her to focus solely on her studies. But when I noticed her looking insecure, afraid she was being a freeloader, I relented and let her load the dishwasher or sweep the floor so she wouldn't feel entirely useless. When both girls eventually received acceptance letters from an Ivy League university, my heart swelled with pride. I thought my sleepless nights and financial sacrifices had paid off. I thought I had done a good thing. It was all an illusion. I had nurtured a parasite. I closed my eyes, the memory of her viral diary, the pain of being the burden, flashing behind my eyelids. She had painted me as a tyrannical abuser, monetizing her fabricated victimhood on social media, while I was doxxed, stalked, and eventually murdered. Opening my eyes, the residual fear melted into a hardened, icy resolve. This time, I wouldn't be their sacrificial lamb. I would not soften my heart. "Aunt Claire, what did my dad just text you?" Chloe's voice pulled me from my dark reverie. She was standing entirely too close to me, craning her neck and shifting her weight, as she actively tried to peek at my illuminated iPhone screen. Her wide, innocent eyes masked a deeply calculating nature. In my previous life, the moment she asked that question, panic had seized me. terrified that a high school senior would suffer an emotional breakdown. Knowing her parents had essentially discarded her for $100, I had frantically locked the screen and hidden the phone behind my back. I never let her see the truth, but Chloe hadn't seen my actions as maternal protection. Because of her inherent cynicism, she assumed I was hiding a massive windfall. She genuinely believed her parents had sent me thousands of dollars, and that I was embezzling her trust fund to pamper myself and Mia. It wasn't until after our brutal public fallout post-graduation that Mia revealed the truth to me. Chloe had been secretly calling her parents from the bathroom, sobbing and complaining about how miserably I treated her. Dave and Sarah, rather than telling their daughter the truth about the $100, would furiously curse me out over the phone, validating her victimhood, and telling her to just endure the abuse until graduation. Remembering their vile hypocrisy, a cold smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. This time, there would be no secrets. I unlocked my phone, opened the Venmo app, and shoved the screen directly under her nose. "Here," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Your parents said you are living with us now, but they only sent $100. That doesn't even cover a fraction of the rent in this neighborhood." It was the harsh, unfiltered truth. Rent for this spacious, modern apartment was astronomical. If we were splitting costs fairly per person, her share of the roof over her head alone should have exceeded $1,000 a month. Yet, for 3 entire years in my past life, she had lived here completely rent-free, utterly oblivious to the financial strain she caused, and entirely devoid of gratitude. I locked the phone and let out a heavy, exaggerated sigh, making sure my frustration was palpable. The cost of living in this school district is just absurd. It is almost $3,500 a month just for the lease. I honestly have no idea what your parents are thinking. $100 won't even cover your groceries for a week, let alone utility bills or gas. Being a young girl, the blunt reality of the numbers hit her hard. Her cheeks flushed a deep, humiliating crimson. She looked down at her shoes, her voice shrinking to a whisper. "Aunt Claire, I don't eat that much." Behind me, Mia, who had just walked into the living room, nervously tugged at the sleeve of my cardigan. She shot me a look that silently asked if I was being too harsh on her cousin. I reached back and gently patted Mia's hand, reassuring her before turning my unyielding gaze back to Chloe. "Listen to me, Chloe. Regardless of what your parents did, I am your aunt," I stated firmly, laying down the unshakable boundaries of this new timeline. "I'm not going to kick you out, and I won't demand rent from a teenager. You will eat whatever we eat. If we have steak, you have steak. If we have pasta, you have pasta. But beyond basic room and board, you shouldn't expect anything else from me. I am not your ATM." "I understand, Aunt Claire," she murmured, her head bowed so low, her chin practically touched her chest. She looked like a kicked puppy. For a fleeting second, the ingrained maternal instinct in me wanted to reach out and hug her, to tell her everything would be fine. But I violently crushed that urge. This was the exact pitiful facade that had fooled me into giving her everything I had in my past life. Getting accepted into a prestigious university didn't magically rewrite a person's moral code. Even when she walked through the gates of the Ivy League, she remained a venomous, ungrateful snake. September arrived with a crisp breeze, signaling the start of the school year. With it came the first major financial trap that had turned me into a massive sucker in my previous life. Whether in my past life or this current one, the sheer audacity of Dave and Sarah continued to baffle me. What kind of parents completely ignore their child's private school tuition bill? Did they honestly believe that just because they dumped their daughter at my house, they had absolved themselves of all financial responsibility? In my past life, the chaos of the back-to-school season had consumed me. I had logged into Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy's parent portal and paid Mia's exorbitant tuition with my own credit card. Because Dave had never mentioned it, I had completely assumed Chloe's tuition had been handled directly by her parents. I remained blissfully ignorant until Chloe's homeroom teacher called me in a panic, demanding I come to the school immediately. That was when I discovered the trap. Dave and Sarah had listed me as the primary emergency contact and the sole billing sponsor on Chloe's enrollment forms. When I rushed into the guidance counselor's office that day, I found Chloe standing in the corner, her head bowed, looking like a criminal awaiting sentencing, even though it was entirely her parents' negligence. Seeing her public humiliation shattered my heart. I immediately pulled out my checkbook, paid the massive tuition fee out of my own savings, and ushered her back to class. Later that evening, a tearful Chloe had asked me, "Aunt Claire, why didn't Mia's teacher call you to the office?" Looking into her tear-filled eyes, what was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to tell her? Because I actually care about my daughter, and paid her tuition weeks ago, while your parents couldn't care less if you get kicked out? Terrified of fostering a permanent hatred between a child and her parents, I swallowed my anger toward my brother-in-law, and took the blame myself. "It is all my fault, sweetie," I had lied soothingly. "I paid Mia's a while ago, but your parents only wired me your tuition money yesterday." With the rush of the first day of school, it completely slipped my mind. "I'm so sorry." That well-intentioned lie became the very weapon she used to destroy me. In her infamous, viral diary, she twisted that moment into a narrative of profound cruelty. My parents had transferred my tuition and living expenses to my aunt well in advance. But she purposely withheld the money, refusing to pay my school fees. It wasn't until I was dragged into the office and humiliated in front of my entire class that she reluctantly handed over the money that was rightfully mine. That tiny incident morphed into an unhealable scar that haunted my entire senior year. This time, when my phone rang and the caller ID flashed Oak Ridge Prep, I didn't panic. I calmly let it ring. After the second missed call, I finally answered with a practiced tone of mild confusion. "Hello, is this Chloe's guardian?" The rigid voice of the homeroom teacher echoed through the speaker. "Speaking. Is something wrong?" I asked smoothly. "Mrs. Lee, there is an urgent administrative matter regarding Chloe. We need you to come down to the school office immediately." "I'll be right there," I replied, hanging up. I didn't rush out the door with my hair in a mess like last time. Instead, I took my time. I applied a neat layer of lipstick, styled my hair, and picked up my designer handbag. On the way to the school, I purposely took a detour to a boutique bakery downtown. I bought Mia's absolute favorite artisanal strawberry shortcake and ordered a premium matcha boba tea. Senior year was a pressure cooker. A little sugar rush could do wonders for a teenager's morale. In my previous life, because I was financially supporting 2 teenagers simultaneously, buying 2 of every expensive gadget, paying double for SAT prep, and handling Boston rent, my husband and I were under immense financial strain. I rarely had the disposable income to spoil the kids with random luxury treats. But this time, I had absolutely no intention of treating Chloe as an equal. I was no longer playing the role of the martyr, which meant I had plenty of extra cash to spoil my actual daughter. By the time I leisurely strolled through the grand oak doors of Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy's administrative building, a full hour and a half had passed. I carried my boutique shopping bags with an air of absolute unbothered grace. As I stepped into the guidance counselor's office, both Chloe and her homeroom teacher, Mrs. Higgins, shot me simultaneously strained looks. I carefully set my designer handbag and the bakery boxes onto a nearby mahogany credenza before offering a polite, perfectly practiced smile. "I am so sorry for the delay. Mrs. Higgins, Boston traffic was an absolute nightmare. Is there something wrong?" Mrs. Higgins, a strict woman in her 50s, was clearly irritated by my tardiness. While she maintained her professional veneer, her tone was unmistakably sharp. "Mrs. Lee, I'm glad you finally made it. The issue is quite serious. Classes have officially commenced, but the bursar's office has yet to receive Chloe's tuition payment for the semester. Given how busy you must be, we assumed perhaps you simply forgot to process the transfer." "What?" I gasped, bringing both hands up to cover my mouth in a display of theatrical shock. My gasp was intentionally loud enough to draw the attention of the other faculty members working at their desks across the open plan office. Heads turned in our direction. "Chloe's tuition hasn't been paid?" I asked, my voice trembling with perfectly feigned disbelief. "That is correct, Mrs. Lee," Mrs. Higgins said, her brow furrowing. "Having an unpaid balance on the first day of school reflects very poorly on both the student and the family's commitment to our institution. Oh, Mrs. Higgins, there must be a terrible misunderstanding. I have absolutely nothing to do with her tuition, I said, leaning forward. Her parents told her to wait at my door with a suitcase. And then they immediately fled out of state for work. They Venmo'd me exactly $100 and told me it was for her living expenses. They never transferred a single dime for her school fees. I had no idea this was happening. Furthermore, I am not Chloe's legal guardian or parent. I'm merely her aunt. My daughter, Mia, is a student here, but she's in the AP honors track. Oak Ridge Prep was highly competitive, strictly segregating students based on their entrance exam scores. My daughter, whom I had raised with painstaking care, ranked in the top 10 in the entire city, and was naturally placed in the elite Tier 1 class. Chloe, while not failing, was distinctly average and had been placed in Tier 5. In my previous life, I had sacrificed my own health and Mia as free time to constantly tutor Chloe, helping her slowly claw her way up the ranks. Hearing that I was merely a relative taking in a child, and that my actual daughter was one of the school's top academic stars, Mrs. Higgins's rigid posture instantly relaxed. Her tone softened dramatically. Is that so? Goodness, I apologize. Her parents listed your name and number as the primary billing contact, so we naturally assumed you were handling her accounts. I completely understand, Mrs. Higgins. Let me call her parents right now and clear this up, I said, reaching into my purse. Suddenly Chloe grabbed the sleeve of my cashmere sweater, her knuckles white. Aunt Claire, she whispered frantically. Didn't my mom and dad wire you the money for my school? Chloe, what on earth are you talking about? I replied, my voice projecting clearly across the quiet office. I showed you the Venmo transaction on my phone yesterday, remember? $100. That doesn't even cover your share of the groceries for the week, let alone a prep school tuition. The burning stares of the surrounding faculty members and a few passing students were melting Chloe's composure. Her face flushed a deep, humiliating red. Can you just pay it for me first? She pleaded, her voice cracking. I'll make my dad pay you back when we get home. Sweetheart, what are you saying? A semester here is $20,000. I exclaimed, ensuring everyone heard the exact figure. I just paid Mia's tuition, and I paid our apartment's lease up front. My bank account is practically empty. I only have the $100 your parents sent yesterday. Should I give Mrs. Higgins that? Hey, Mrs. Higgins, now fully realizing the horrific parenting situation at play, adjusted her glasses and looked at me with deep sympathy. Mrs. Lee, please just call her father. Of course, I was just about to, I said, dialing Dave's number and pointedly tapping the speakerphone icon. Hey Claire, Dave's oblivious voice echoed through the office. Dave, I started. Did you and Sarah get so busy with your new jobs that you forgot to pay Chloe's tuition? What? Isn't Chloe living at your place now? He deflected, his sheer audacity echoing off the mahogany walls. I wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. Yes, Dave. You dropped your daughter at my door without a prior conversation, which I accepted without asking for rent, but the $100 you sent won't even cover her meals. Let's put that aside for now. How could you forget something as massive as her tuition? I am sitting in the guidance counselor's office right now. Why don't you explain this to her teachers? Caught entirely off guard and realizing he was on speakerphone in front of Oak Ridge administrators, Dave stammered over his words. It took Mrs. Higgins, greeting him sternly, for him to finally compose himself. Hello ma'am. Look, my wife and I are working out of state right now. We left all of Chloe's affairs in her aunt's hands, so maybe she could just. I ruthlessly cut him off before he could dump the financial burden on me. Dave, I love Chloe, and I would love to help. But I just paid Mia's tuition, and fronted a fortune for the apartment lease so the girls could be close to campus. I'm completely tapped out. If you can't afford the $20,000, you need to start calling the rest of the family for a loan immediately. Mrs. Higgins leaned toward the phone, her voice dripping with institutional authority. Mr. Lee, according to school policy, if the tuition is not paid in full today, Chloe will have to return home and self-study until the balance is cleared. She cannot attend classes. All right. I get it. I'll wire the money to Claire right now. Dave snapped defensively. Put Chloe on the phone. Chloe took the phone with trembling hands. Dad, she whispered, you worthless brat. Dave's voice exploded through the tiny speaker, making the teachers flinch. All you do is bleed me dry. Do you have any idea how much money you cost me? You better get into an Ivy League, or you're a complete waste of my life. He hung up violently. 5 minutes later, a massive wire transfer hit my account. Without missing a beat, I forwarded every single cent to the school's billing department. The heavy mahogany doors of the guidance office clicked shut behind us. The moment we were out of sight, Chloe crumbled. Tears spilled hot and fast down her cheeks. Aunt Claire, she sobbed, grabbing my arm. I know my parents dumping me at your house has caused you so much trouble. I can move into the boarding dorms if you hate me. But please, can you stop being so cold? Can you just go back to being the good Aunt Claire you used to be? Looking at her weeping face, I let out a long heavy sigh. If I didn't know how this story ended, her performance would have broken my heart. Chloe, I said softly, layering my voice with faux sympathy and masterful gaslighting. It is not that I want to be like this. You saw what happened in there. Your parents abandoned you financially. In the past, whenever you came over, didn't I buy 2 of everything? 1 for you, 1 for Mia. That vintage Tiffany lock necklace you're wearing right now, I bought that for your christening. If I had the money, why wouldn't I spend it on you? You have to realize the anger you're feeling belongs to your parents. They are the ones neglecting you. But let's drop it for now. Wipe your tears and get to class. Having thoroughly manipulated her perception of the event, I watched her walk down the hall. This time, I wasn't going to bleed myself dry. Out of a misplaced sense of duty. I needed her to explicitly understand that any humiliation she suffered was entirely her parents' fault, not mine. With a spring in my step, and the deep satisfaction of having kept $20,000 in my bank account, I walked to the Tier 1 classrooms to find Mia. Mia, honey. I smiled, handing her the boutique bakery bag. I got you your favorite strawberry shortcake and a matcha boba. Here is $100 bill for your weekly allowance. If you see anything you like on the way home, just buy it. Mia looked at the crisp bill, hesitating. What about Chloe? You don't need to worry about your cousin, I replied breezily. I fully expected my sweet, empathetic daughter to argue with me, to insist on sharing. Instead, Mia looked down at the bakery box and spoke in a quiet voice. Mom, I actually really don't like her. Oh. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. Yeah. Since we were kids, she always forces me to cover up her lies. She takes my clothes and jewelry without asking. And I've caught her stealing cash from Uncle Dave's wallet before. I gently stroked Mia's hair, telling her not to let it bother her. In my previous life, I had naively believed that Chloe's eventual betrayal was simply the result of the intense psychological pressure of being a high school senior living in someone else's house. I thought she was just a confused, stressed kid. I never realized the rot went all the way to her core. She had always been a sociopath. That evening, after we finished dinner, Chloe immediately stood up and began stacking the plates. I'll do the dishes tonight, she announced brightly. I casually glanced at her, then let my eyes drift toward the corner of the ceiling. After my rebirth, I had discreetly installed a high-definition wide security camera in the living room and kitchen to document everything. No need, Chloe. I'll take care of it, I said dismissively. Please, Aunt Claire, she insisted, turning on the faucet. I really want to help out around the house. If you don't let me do chores, I'll feel too guilty to keep living here. I put on a conflicted, reluctant expression. Well, all right, since you're so determined, I won't stop you. But make sure you go straight to studying when you're done. Don't fall behind on your coursework. Once she was scrubbing the pans, I grabbed my car keys and ushered Mia out the door. We were headed to Mia's elite, one-on-one private tutor. One of the main reasons I had rented this apartment was so the girls could commute as day students, avoiding the mandatory evening study halls at the boarding dorms, which freed up their nights for specialized, private coaching. In my last life, wanting to be fair but constrained by budget, I had placed both girls in a generic, cheaper group prep class. This time, I refused to spend a single penny of my hard-earned money on Chloe's education. The thousands of dollars I saved were funneled directly into hiring a premium, Ivy League-educated private tutor, just for Mia. When Mia and I returned home hours later, Chloe practically sprinted out of her bedroom upon hearing the deadbolt turn. "Aunt Claire, where did you two go?" she asked, her eyes darting between us. "Oh, I was just dropping Mia off at her AP tutoring session," I replied casually, slipping off my heels. Chloe's expression darkened, her shoulders dropping in disappointment. "Tutoring, but I thought you said you were completely out of money." I frowned internally. I hadn't realized how manipulative she was when she was younger. She was subtly accusing me of lying to the school about being broke, pointing out that I clearly had funds to pamper my own daughter while neglecting her. "Oh, sweetie." I smiled smoothly, pretending I didn't catch her accusation. "Mia's tutoring package was booked and paid for months ago, during the summer. Do you want to go too?" Her eyes lit up with predatory hope. "Can I really, Aunt Claire?" I knew exactly what she was trying to pull, but I played dumb. "Well, my permission doesn't really matter. It all depends on your parents. Here, take my phone, call your dad." I'll text him the tutor's Venmo details. Once he pays the $1,500 monthly retainer, you can start going tomorrow. The light instantly died in her eyes. No, that is okay, Aunt Claire. Actually, homework takes up so much of my time anyway. I don't really need a tutor. I'll just have Mia teach me whatever she learned when she gets home." "Oh, haha, absolutely not," I laughed coldly. "It is senior year, Mia is exhausted after a full day of school, and 3 hours of private tutoring. I won't have her staying up late to play teacher. If you have questions, just ask your professors or classmates tomorrow." "All right. Okay, I'll just go study," she stammered, retreating. If I hadn't caught the sheer venom in her glare and the tight clenching of her fists as she turned around, I might have still believed her innocent, harmless act. I mentally scoffed. "If you just keep your head down and survive senior year quietly, I won't charge you for the roof over your head or the food on your plate. But don't expect a single red cent from my wallet ever again." For the next few weeks, an uneasy but manageable peace settled over the apartment. That illusion of tranquility shattered on Saturday, when my husband Mark returned home from his corporate consulting trip. The moment he walked through the door, he didn't even drop his suitcase before grabbing my elbow and pulling me quietly into the master bedroom, shutting the door tightly behind us. "Claire, have you been abusing Chloe?" he demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" I glared at him. "Look at this," Mark said, aggressively shoving his phone into my hands. "Look at the texts Dave and Sarah have been sending me all week." I snatched the phone and read through the long rambling iMessages. Dave claimed that because we were family, they trusted us completely with their daughter's well-being. He aggressively wrote that if I hated Chloe so much, I never should have agreed to take her in, and he accused me of severe, psychologically damaging favoritism between the two girls. A bitter, mocking laugh escaped my throat. What do they mean? If I didn't like her, I shouldn't have agreed. When did I ever agree to this arrangement, Mark? I woke up one morning, opened the front door, and your precious niece was standing on the welcome mat with a suitcase. They completely ambushed me. And now they have the audacity to play the victim. I stepped closer to Mark, my voice rising in anger. "And let's talk about your wonderful brother. He wired me exactly $100, and expected me to quietly pay a $20,000 private school tuition for him. What am I to them? A limitless ATM. Claire, please, keep your voice down," Mark pleaded, running a hand over his face. "Don't be so harsh. We watched Chloe grow up. She is practically a second daughter to you. Do not use my past kindness against me, Mark. If I didn't care about her, I would have slammed the door in her face on day one," I fired back. "But my patience has limits. If you feel so incredibly bad for her, perfect. She desperately wants private tutoring. You can personally pay her $1,000 monthly fees." Mark balked, taking a step back. "I don't have that kind of disposable income, You manage all the finances. Exactly. I snapped, pulling open my laptop and pulling up our budgeting spreadsheets. Do you have any idea what it costs to live in this zip code? Look at these numbers, Mark. Rent, electricity, water, internet, Mia's tuition, Mia's tutoring. We've easily spent over $87,000 this year alone. Her own parents refuse to spend a dime on her. I literally do not have extra money to subsidize Dave's child. Mark stared blankly at the glowing Excel screen. Like many men who let their wives handle the mental load of household management, he had absolutely no concept of how blisteringly expensive it was to raise a child in Boston's premier educational district. Fortunately, I had always kept my lucrative freelance writing income a strict secret from him. If he knew how much money I actually brought in, he would definitely try to force me to bankroll his deadbeat brother's kid. All right, I understand, Mark finally conceded, waving his hands in surrender. You're right. Giving her a free bedroom and 3 square meals a day is already doing them a massive favor. We've done our legal and moral duty. Everything else is Dave and Sarah's problem. Exactly, I said, snapping the laptop shut, satisfied that I had thoroughly dismantled his arguments. I turned and opened the bedroom door to head to the bathroom to wash my face. As the door swung open, I caught the unmistakable sound of a latch clicking down the hall. Chloe had just hastily pulled her bedroom door shut. She had been standing in the hallway, eavesdropping on our entire argument. I paused for a moment, staring at the closed door, before shrugging. I hadn't said a single word that wasn't the objective truth. If hearing reality hurt her feelings, that was entirely her problem. The grueling midterm examinations at Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy finally came to a close, and the results for the fall semester were officially posted on the school's digital portal. Sitting at the kitchen island with my laptop, I refreshed the page and felt a massive wave of relief wash over me. Mia had achieved the seemingly impossible. Her class rank had surged from 23rd directly to 9th place. Looking at her digital report card, I couldn't help but smile from ear to ear. This was the very first time my daughter had broken into the highly coveted top 10 of her grade. As anyone familiar with elite prep schools knows, the higher you climb in the rankings, the exponentially harder it becomes to advance even a single spot. Every student at the top is a genius with limitless resources. This incredible leap proved that the astronomical fees I was paying her private Ivy League-educated tutor were worth every single penny. Chloe, on the other hand, faced a drastically different reality. Without my financial backing to pay for premium tutoring, and without Mia acting as her free, built-in homework helper every night, she floundered. Furthermore, after the humiliating incident in the guidance counselor's office on the first day of school, I had heard through the grapevine that she completely isolated herself, refusing to communicate with her teachers or classmates out of sheer embarrassment, the lack of support, and her own social withdrawal. Her midterm results were disastrous. Her rank plummeted from hovering comfortably in the top 200s down to the bottom 400s. Right on cue, as if sensing the shifting power dynamics, my iPhone vibrated on the marble countertop. The caller ID flashed Dave's name. I picked up the phone, answered the call, but remained perfectly silent, waiting for him to speak first. Tesk. A loud, arrogant click of the tongue echoed through the speaker. Without a second thought, I immediately pressed the red button and hung up. If he wanted to act like a petulant child, I would treat him like one. A minute later, the phone rang again. I casually swiped to answer. Hello, Claire. Why the hell did you just hang up on me? Dave demanded, his voice thick with indignation. Oh, I'm sorry, I replied in a flat monotone voice. I didn't hear a proper greeting or a name. I naturally assumed it was a spam robocall. What do you want, Dave? I just logged into the parent portal. Why did my daughter's grades drop so catastrophically? He barked. I rolled my eyes. Dave, perhaps that is a question you should be asking your daughter, not me. She clearly hasn't been putting her mind to her studies. We are halfway through the first semester. Every other student at Oak Ridge is studying aggressively and advancing. Yet she is the only one rapidly sliding backward. Listen to me, Claire. I am only speaking to you politely because you are my older brother's wife, he threatened, his tone turning venomous before he could finish his pathetic attempt at intimidation. I hung up the phone for the second time. I set the phone down and calmly took a sip of my coffee. He called back immediately. I ignored it. He called a second time. I let it ring out. After he continuously bombarded my phone with 3 consecutive calls, I finally answered. If you cannot speak to me with basic human decency and respect, I will permanently block your number, I stated coldly. He exhaled heavily, clearly struggling to contain his temper. Fine. I just want to say this. During her freshman and sophomore years, Chloe was consistently ranked in the top 200. She comes to live at your apartment for half a semester, and her grades completely tank. You need to take responsibility for this. First of all, junior and senior years are notorious for a massive spike in academic difficulty. A drop in grades is entirely normal for students who can't handle the pressure, I retorted sharply. Second, if you genuinely believe that living in my luxury apartment is the sole reason for her academic failure, then you are more than welcome to pull her out of my home and pay for her to live in the campus dormitories. Honestly, I secretly hoped he would move her into the dorms. It would rid me of this massive burden and make my life infinitely easier. However, I knew Dave better than anyone. There was absolutely no way he would agree to that. Boarding at Oakridge required an upfront payment of thousands of dollars for room and board, plus an $800 mandatory monthly meal plan. A man who only sent $100 for living expenses would never part with that kind of cash. Claire, what kind of nonsense is that? Dave scoffed, quickly backpedaling from the dorm suggestion. I heard a rumor that Mia's grades are doing exceptionally well. They are cousins. For God's sake, you should make Mia spend her evenings helping her older cousin study. Furthermore, I also heard that you hired an incredibly expensive private tutor for Mia. Listen, making that tutor teach 2 kids in the living room is the exact same amount of effort as teaching one. How can you be so selfish and show such blatant favoritism between the 2 girls? Dave, I sighed, marveling at his sheer entitlement. It's not about me being selfish. A premium, private Ivy League tutor charges by the student. A one-on-one session has a completely different price tag than a 2-on-1 session. Do you honestly think a highly sought-after professional is going to teach a second student for free out of the kindness of their heart? If you desperately want Chloe to join those sessions, I will text you the tutor's Venmo account. You can negotiate with her directly. It is only about $1,500 a month, since both you and Sarah are working out of state to make money. Surely you wouldn't be so cheap as to deny your own daughter essential tutoring fees, right? Claire, you are completely obsessed with money, he screamed into the phone. This time, before I could even hit the button, he violently hung up on me. I stared at the black screen of my phone and let out a dark chuckle. Dave's repeated use of the phrase I heard was incredibly telling. It wasn't hard to guess who his source was. It was glaringly obvious that Chloe had been spending her free time secretly calling her parents, twisting the narrative, and filing tearful complaints about me. The very next morning, the tension in the apartment was thick enough to cut with a knife. As soon as we finished eating our breakfast of avocado toast and scrambled eggs, Chloe abruptly pushed her chair back, stood up straight, and delivered a stiff, highly theatrical bow. Aunt Claire, she began, her voice dripping with calculated martyrdom. For the past half semester, I have been the one doing the dishes and cleaning the kitchen. However, you've seen my midterm grades. They have dropped significantly. Unlike Mia, I am not privileged enough to have a private, one-on-one tutor. Therefore, I have decided that I need to dedicate every waking second to my studies. Starting today, I will no longer be doing any household chores. I squinted at her, effortlessly seeing through her manipulative performance. That is absolutely wonderful news, Chloe, I replied, my voice brimming with exaggerated enthusiasm. If you recall, I explicitly told you not to do chores when you first moved in, but you stubbornly insisted on doing them anyway. Now that you've finally decided to drop the housework and focus entirely on your academics, I couldn't be happier. She blinked, clearly thrown off balance by my cheerful and immediate acceptance of her terms. Before silently grabbing her backpack and leaving for school, once both girls were safely out the door and on their way to campus, I poured myself another cup of coffee and pulled out my smartphone. It was time to do some digging. I opened TikTok, searching through the local Boston tags. In my previous life, I knew that Chloe had eventually gained massive notoriety and become a viral influencer by chronicling her supposed misery. However, in my past life, her diary wasn't exposed to the public until after the college entrance exams were over. This time, I wanted to be proactive. As I scrolled through the local Oak Ridge Prep and Boston student tags, I stumbled upon an anonymous account whose bio read, documenting the pain of being the burden. At first glance, I wasn't entirely sure it was her, but as I began scrolling through the grid of videos, which featured melancholic indie music playing over aesthetic, gloomy shots of rain against a window pane, or a dimly lit desk, the highly specific captions confirmed my suspicions beyond a shadow of a doubt. I tapped on the video pinned to the top of her profile. Titled Day 1 of Senior Year, the text overlay read, "My cousin and I go to the same private school. On the first day, my aunt magically remembered to pay my cousin's $20,000 tuition, but conveniently forgot mine. She purposely let me get dragged into the guidance office and humiliated in front of everyone before she reluctantly paid it." I opened the comment section. It was an absolute bloodbath of internet vitriol directed squarely at me. Thousands of teenagers and angry adults were tearing me to shreds. However, hidden among the blind rage, there were one or two rational users asking logical questions. Wait, did your aunt refuse to pay because your parents didn't send her the money, or did they send the money and she just held it hostage? Chloe's response was a masterclass in manipulative ambiguity. "I literally saw my dad Venmo her the money the day before." I scoffed out loud. "Yes, he Venmo'd me exactly $100. I swiped to the next major video, titled, Day 7. My aunt comes home every single day with artisanal pastries and expensive boba tea for my cousin. I wish I didn't have to live as a guest in her house. If I were with my own mom, I'd get little cakes too. Honestly, my aunt doesn't need to sneak the treats into my cousin's room. She can eat them out in the open. It's not like I'd dare to ask for a bite anyway." The comment section was completely radicalized. "OMG. Your aunt is a literal monster. Who denies a child a piece of cake? Why the blatant favoritism? Didn't you say your parents sent her living expenses? Demand that money back and buy your own food. I hope her actual daughter fails all her exams. What a wicked woman." Yet, buried beneath the hate, I found a couple of dissenting voices of reason. It is her own money. Of course she is going to spoil her actual daughter. You're living there for free. If you're so miserable, go back to your parents. You literally said you wouldn't ask for a bite. So why are you posting this on the internet if not to incite a hate mob against your aunt? Agreed with the above. Being a guardian to a relative is a nightmare. If your parents actually paid your way, she wouldn't treat you like this. Are you paying Boston rent? Stop whining while living off her dime. I silently tapped the like button on those rare logical comments and continued scrolling. I clicked on a recent video titled, Day 30. I am so incredibly jealous of my cousin. She doesn't have to lift a finger to do chores. And she gets a private Ivy League tutor to help her study while I wash the dishes. I didn't even want to look at the comments. But one top-voted thread caught my eye and sent a chill down my spine. "Bestie, I've been following your diary for a month. Your aunt is financially and emotionally abusing you. You need to fight back. Start by refusing to do any chores. Tell your parents you want to move into the dorms. And honestly, if your aunt keeps torturing you, dox her, drop her name and address, and the internet will handle the rest. We will get justice for you." Another comment replied, "Yes, expose her. We ride at dawn." My brow furrowed deeply. In my previous life, these exact social justice warriors, completely blind to the actual truth, were the very people who had tracked down my address, harassed me relentlessly, and ultimately pushed me into the river. This TikTok account was a ticking time bomb. I needed to keep it under strict surveillance. If she dared to leak my personal information, or my physical address this time, I would not hesitate to destroy her entirely. Before I could deal with the internet mob, I needed to address the immediate threat inside my own home. I walked down the hall and pushed open the door to Chloe's bedroom. I began thoroughly searching the space. While I knew that rummaging through a teenager's bedroom bordered on an invasion of privacy, I was technically acting in loco parentis, in order to prevent her from orchestrating a digital witch hunt that could completely derail my daughter's crucial final semester. I had to aggressively intervene. It didn't take long. Buried deep inside a hollowed-out textbook at the bottom of her closet, I found her secondary, private smartphone. Oak Ridge Prep had an incredibly strict policy against secondary devices to prevent cheating, and I had forbidden distractions in the house. Finding the contraband confirmed my suspicions about how she was producing her TikTok content. I placed the phone on her bed, took a clear high-resolution photograph of it, and immediately attached the image to a group text containing Dave, Sarah, and Mrs. Higgins, her homeroom teacher. I added a brief message explaining that I had found the device hidden in her room, which likely explained her catastrophic drop in grades. I then left the phone on her pillow. How the school and her parents chose to discipline her was entirely up to them. I was washing my hands of the situation when the girls returned home for their lunch break. The fallout was spectacular. Chloe stormed through the front door, her face twisted in absolute fury. For the very first time, she completely dropped her innocent, victimized persona in front of us. She violently hurled her heavy North Face backpack onto the hardwood floor with a deafening crash. "How dare you go into my room?" she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You snitched on me to the school. Mrs. Higgins called me into the office and told me I have to surrender the phone to her this afternoon, and I won't get it back until after graduation." I stood calmly in the kitchen, casually wiping down the marble counter with a microfiber cloth. I slowly turned my gaze to the discarded backpack on the floor, my expression freezing over. "First of all," I said, my voice dangerously low and steady, "this is my apartment. My name is on the lease. I pay the astronomical rent. I will go into whatever room I please. Second of all, I went into that room with the intention of cleaning. It was by pure accident that I discovered you were harboring contraband." I stepped out from behind the counter, staring her down. "As the adult responsible for you, I have watched your grades absolutely nosedive over the past 2 months. I cannot simply stand by and watch you sabotage your own future. Informing your parents and your teachers was the only responsible course of action. Whatever consequences they decide to enforce are for your own good." Having delivered my flawless, legally unassailable justification, I simply stepped right over her discarded backpack, completely ignoring her tantrum. I turned to Mia, who was standing quietly in the entryway. "Come on, Mia. Lunch is ready on the table," I said warmly. Chloe stood in the middle of the hallway, her chest heaving as she processed my absolute lack of guilt or sympathy. After a long suffocating silence, she finally bent down, picked up her heavy backpack, and silently retreated into her bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. I did not go to her door. I did not knock, and I did not ask her to come out and eat with us. Mia and I enjoyed a quiet, peaceful lunch together. Once we were finished, I instructed Mia to go to her room and take a quick power nap before her afternoon AP classes. I remained in the kitchen, methodically washing the dishes and sanitizing the countertops. However, as I finished drying my hands, a calculated thought crossed my mind. Legally, I still had a duty of care. I walked over to the pantry, pulled out a box of imported butter cookies that I had originally bought as a study snack for Mia, and placed them in a small grocery bag. I walked over to Chloe's bedroom and quietly hung the bag on her doorknob. Whether she chose to eat them, throw them away, or smash them was entirely her prerogative. As far as I was concerned, I was flawlessly executing the baseline requirements of a guardian, shielding myself from any legal or moral accusations of actual starvation or neglect. Following the smartphone confiscation incident, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted dramatically. The explosive tension dissolved into a chilling absolute silence. Time seemed to accelerate as the relentless pressure of senior year consumed our lives. To my genuine shock, After that explosive lunchtime confrontation, Chloe didn't attempt any further overt acts of rebellion or sabotage. Without her hidden phone to fuel her TikTok hate campaign, and fully aware that I was meticulously documenting every interaction with my security cameras, she retreated entirely into her shell. She became a ghost in my apartment, the only time we ever exchanged words, or even acknowledged each other's existence was during our brief, silent dinners at the kitchen table. This eerie peace allowed me to channel 100% of my energy, finances, and emotional support into Mia. The winter months in Boston were brutal, filled with endless snowstorms, SAT prep sessions, and the agonizing process of filling out the Common App. I spent my evenings reviewing Mia's college admission essays, coordinating her Ivy League campus tours, and ensuring she was eating highly nutritious meals to keep her stamina up during the grueling AP exam season. While Mia was thriving under the intense focused support, I could see the toll the isolation was taking on Chloe. Without my guidance to help her navigate the complex college application bureaucracy, and without her parents bothering to check in on her deadlines, she was completely adrift. Before we knew it, the snow melted, the cherry blossoms bloomed across the Oak Ridge Prep campus, and the final terrifying hurdle of the academic year was upon us. The national college entrance examinations, and the subsequent release of the admission decisions. The apartment felt like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. I knew that the silence over the past few months wasn't a sign that Chloe had changed, it was simply the calm before the storm. The final reckoning was coming, and this time, I was fully prepared to face it. The infamous Ivy Day arrived in late March, bringing with it an atmosphere so thick with anxiety you could practically taste it. The entire apartment felt as though it were holding its breath. At precisely 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the admission portals for the nation's top universities were scheduled to update simultaneously. Mia and I sat huddled around the kitchen island, the glowing screen of her MacBook illuminating our tense faces. When the clock struck the hour, Mia's trembling fingers hit the refresh button. What followed was a blur of screams, tears of absolute joy, and fierce embraces. Unsurprisingly, Mia's relentless hard work, supported by the elite one-on-one private tutoring I had heavily invested in, yielded spectacular results. In my previous life, burdened by the financial anchor of supporting 2 students, Mia had barely scraped into an Ivy League school, forced into a less competitive and less desirable major, just to secure an acceptance letter. This time, the narrative was entirely rewritten. Mia was accepted into Harvard University. Not only was she accepted, but she graduated as the valedictorian of Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy, and secured the title of salutatorian for the entire state of Massachusetts. She was an academic superstar. Every single prestigious program she applied to had rolled out the red carpet, allowing her absolute freedom to choose her major and shape her own destiny. Across the hallway, the reality was starkly different. Chloe, stripped of my financial subsidies, lacking the premium tutoring I refused to pay for, and missing Mia's nightly homework assistance, faced the brutal consequences of her actions. Having spent the critical first semester plotting her viral TikTok campaign, instead of studying, her academic foundation had completely crumbled. As the weeks rolled on, the rejection letters piled up. She was categorically denied by every single top-tier and mid-tier university she applied to. Ultimately, she was only accepted into a profoundly ordinary, low-ranking state college with an incredibly high acceptance rate. While the outcome of producing 2 Ivy League students was drastically different from my past life, the sheer prestige of raising the state salutatorian and a Harvard admit was more than enough to attract the media's attention. Local Boston news stations and educational journalists flooded my inbox, practically begging for an exclusive interview on my parenting strategies and the secret to raising such a high-achieving scholar. I agreed to host a small press segment in my living room, completely unaware that a storm was brewing. The morning of the interview, my living room was transformed. 2 camera operators had set up their lighting rigs, and a polished local journalist was sitting across from me on the West Elm sofa, holding a microphone. We were deep into a conversation about the importance of structured study environments and emotional support when a violent crash shattered the professional atmosphere. The front door of my apartment burst open, hitting the wall with a deafening thud. The reporters jumped, the camera operators instantly pivoting their lenses toward the entryway. Standing there, panting and red-faced with furious indignation, were Dave, Sarah, and Chloe. They had clearly driven through the night just to orchestrate this ambush. "Claire!" Dave roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings as he marched directly into the center of the living room, completely ignoring the rolling cameras. "I called you family. I trusted you with my own flesh and blood. But you are nothing but a monster. You severely abused our daughter for an entire year, destroyed her mental health, and completely ruined her future. Because of you, she only got into a pathetic state college. You have to take responsibility for this." The journalists, smelling the kind of sensational viral drama that ratings were built on, didn't intervene. They simply adjusted their audio levels and kept filming. I remained seated, crossing my legs with calculated grace. I looked at Dave with an expression of polite, unbothered confusion. "Excuse me, abuse her?" "Yes, you wicked woman," Sarah shrieked, stepping forward and aggressively waving a thick, printed stack of papers in my face. "This is her diary, and we saw her viral TikTok account. This is absolute proof of your cruelty." Sarah aggressively pointed a trembling finger at my chest. "Our daughter is Ivy League material. She was supposed to go to Harvard alongside Mia, but because you intentionally sabotaged her, forced her to act as your personal maid, humiliated her in front of her entire school, by withholding her tuition, and maliciously denied her the tutoring she desperately needed, she only got into a second-rate school. You destroyed her life, and you will pay for it." I let out a soft dark chuckle, leaning back into the cushions. The sheer audacity of these parasites was staggering. "Oh, and exactly how do you propose I take responsibility for your daughter's academic failures?" Dave puffed out his chest, completely oblivious to how insane he sounded. "You are going to pay for Chloe to take a gap year. You are going to enroll her in the most expensive elite prep school in New England for a postgraduate year. And you are going to personally cover her tuition, rent, and private tutors, until she gets a guaranteed acceptance letter to Harvard. We expect a six-figure check from you today." The living room fell dead silent, save for the quiet whirring of the broadcast cameras. The journalists were exchanging wide-eyed, frantic whispers. The lead reporter, seizing the incredible opportunity, leaned forward and shoved her microphone slightly closer to me. "Mrs. Lee," she began, her tone a mix of investigative sharpness and faux empathy, "this family is making incredibly severe allegations. They claim this pain of being the burden diary details genuine, systemic emotional and financial abuse. As a guardian, even if she isn't your biological child, doesn't your conscience ache knowing you allegedly treated your own niece with such cruelty? In my previous life, the suddenness of this vicious ambush had completely short-circuited my brain. I had been too paralyzed by shock, too stunned by the sheer betrayal of my own family, to form a coherent defense. Because I had remained silent and looked guilty, I had missed the golden window to defend myself, leading the public to permanently brand me as an abuser. This time, my mind was sharp as a diamond. I had spent an entire year meticulously preparing for this exact moment. "I completely understand your concern," I smiled warmly at the reporter. "However, words are wind. Let's look at the actual evidence." I picked up my iPad from the coffee table and synced it to the massive smart TV, mounted on my living room wall. "Let's address the forced labor allegations first." I tapped the screen, the TV flared to life, playing the crisp, high-definition security footage from my kitchen. It clearly showed Chloe practically begging to wash the dishes, while I actively, repeatedly refused. Then, I fast-forwarded to the clip from the morning, after midterm grades were released, where she grandly announced she would no longer do chores, followed by my immediate enthusiastic agreement. I then played a highly curated montage of our daily life, clearly demonstrating that I provided a perfectly safe, comfortable, and equal living environment. Dave and Sarah's faces began to drain of color. "Now, Regarding the financial sabotage, I continued, my voice turning icy. I switched the screen to my banking app exports. Here is the lease for this apartment in the premier school district. $3,500 a month, paid entirely by me. Here are the grocery bills, the utility bills, and the internet bills, all paid by me. I zoomed in on the centerpiece of my defense, Dave's Venmo history. And here is the contribution from Chloe's loving parents. Exactly $100 a month. That was their idea of fully funding a teenager in Boston. The reporter gasped audibly. Furthermore, I pulled up the Oak Ridge prep tuition invoice and the corresponding bank transfer. Here is the $20,000 tuition bill that Dave neglected to pay, causing his daughter's humiliation, which he then aggressively tried to force me to pay out of pocket, before the school threatened to expel her. And finally, here are my exhaustive text logs, practically begging Dave and Sarah to take an active interest in their daughter's education, all of which were ignored or met with insults. I turned to look directly into the camera lens. I am not her parent. I am an aunt who offered a free roof and free meals to an abandoned child. The only people who sabotaged Chloe's future are the people standing right there. The broadcast went live across local networks and quickly went viral on social media. The internet, which had previously sharpened its pitchforks against me, experienced a massive instantaneous whiplash. Dave and Sarah were utterly obliterated in the court of public opinion. The internet ruthlessly labeled them as narcissistic parasites who dumped their child on a relative for free, neglected her, and then had the unmitigated gall to try and extort the very woman who kept her off the streets. Chloe's anonymous TikTok accounts were quickly exposed by internet sleuths, and she was flooded with thousands of hateful comments, mocking her entitlement and exposing her vicious lies. Even our extended family members, who had previously watched from the sidelines, called Dave and Sarah to condemn their repulsive, greedy behavior, completely unable to handle the intense public shaming and the relentless cyberbullying. Dave and Sarah packed up their things and fled back out of state, cowardly abandoning Chloe to face the music alone. The catastrophic failure of her grand plan, combined with the crushing weight of the internet's hatred, shattered Chloe's fragile psyche. She suffered a severe psychological break. She dropped out of her state college before classes even began and began wandering the streets of Boston like a ghost. People in our neighborhood reported seeing her pacing back and forth, her hair matted, muttering feverishly to herself. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was supposed to go to Harvard with Mia. The timeline is wrong. Aunt Claire is different. She wasn't supposed to be like this. If Aunt Claire dies, the timeline will fix itself. Yes, if she dies, I can go back to the beginning. Hearing rumors of her terrifying delusions from our neighbors, I kept myself on high alert. One frigid November evening, I was taking a walk near the banks of the Charles River, the exact haunting location where I had been drowned by the internet mob in my previous life. Without warning, Chloe lunged from the shadows of the bridge, her eyes wide with manic desperation. With a primal scream, she shoved me violently from behind, sending me plunging into the icy black water. As I hit the freezing current, she stood on the bank laughing hysterically, believing she had finally triggered the reset. But she was wrong, because I had been so deeply traumatized by the memory of drowning in my past life. I had spent the entire time the girls were at school secretly taking intensive professional swimming and water survival lessons. Instead of panicking and sinking, I held my breath, oriented myself in the freezing current, and kicked hard toward the embankment. I grabbed onto a stone piling, pulled myself out of the freezing river, and collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air but very much alive. A passing jogger had witnessed the entire attack and immediately called 911. The police arrived within minutes and arrested Chloe for attempted murder. Given her severe delusions and complete detachment from reality, the court determined she was unfit to stand trial. She was officially institutionalized in a high-security state psychiatric facility. This time, the ungrateful parasite paid the ultimate price for her malice. As for Mia and me, we finally got to live the rest of our lives in peace, entirely free from the shadows of the past.
That's all for today. I'm Lina. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories every week. Thanks for watching.